Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Devin Sears, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague and many-time co-host, Chris Miles. We're excited to have him here. And today we are talking about a beginner's guide to the WordPress Block Editor. But before we jump into that, as I mentioned, we have Chris Miles. He's met with us a bunch of times and co-hosted a handful of webinars with us. He is a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we're thrilled to have him here with us today to walk us through building with the block editor. But before we jump into that, there's a few housekeeping items that I want to touch on briefly. Audio, if you can hear us, tell us where you are tuning in from. If you can, find the chat box, there's a picture of it here in this window. It should be in the top right of your browser window. Find the chat box. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have questions, there's a tab next to the chat tab where you can ask questions. I will be off camera answering those questions as best as I can throughout the webinar today. If there are questions I don't know the answer to or that I think everyone would benefit from hearing the answer, I'll probably hold some of those for the end, and we'll have a Q&A with Chris for anything that I don't answer. That being said, on occasion, I will move a question from the chat tab to the Q&A tab. That's just so that we can have a threaded response, which just makes it a little bit easier if we're having a back and forth on any particular issue. Other than that, if you have any issues that you need help with, the best thing to do is just trying to leave the webinar and rejoin it. That fixes most of the issues. The most commonly asked question is, will this be recorded? And the answer is yes. So if you do need to drop out at any time, don't worry. Everyone that has registered will receive a copy of the recording in 24 or 48 hours from now. So that's the housekeeping. Let's jump into today's topic. We're going to start with this saying: building a website isn't always easy, but WordPress gives you the tools to do it right. If you tried to build a website, you may have ran into some difficulty. Sometimes it's just a blank page paralysis where you're not sure what the first step should be. Sometimes it's just a little bit of difficulty using the tools that WordPress offers you to take the vision from your mind and get it onto the website. But today we are going to be walking through the steps that we recommend for getting your page up and running. And we're going to be jumping back and forth from slides into an actual demo. So we're going to be working on showing you how to use the block editor within WordPress itself. So we won't be just operating off of slides today. So what we'll be covering, and I'll go over this briefly before kicking it off to Chris. First, just a very brief introduction of what WordPress is and what the block editor is. Just for anyone that might be a first-time user, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're all starting from the same starting block. Next, we're going to be getting into navigating the WordPress dashboard, showing you some useful spots. There's a lot of information in the WordPress dashboard, so we want to make sure that people aren't overwhelmed and kind of give you a couple highlighted areas to begin with. Then we're going to be getting started with the block editor, how to format and customize blocks. We'll cover a few advanced block features like patterns and things like that. And then we'll touch briefly on enhancing your site with plugins, which are different from blocks. And we'll touch on that for a moment or two. And then we'll get into best practices and next steps. And by the end of this, we're hoping that you are feeling a lot more confident and a lot more excited about building your website. So thank you again for joining us today. I'm going to turn the time over to Chris. I'm going to turn off my camera, but I'll be in the comments and the chat. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions. So Chris, take it away.
Sounds great. So, introduction to WordPress and the block editor. So, WordPress is the software that you can use to build websites with and to publish with. It started out as just blogging software, so that's kind of what made it famous, but it can make any kind of website. And in fact, 40% of websites on the internet right now are WordPress sites. That's how popular it is. You can make business sites, portfolios. A lot of people use them for e-commerce because it's really easy. And one of the things that's both good and sometimes not so good about WordPress is how flexible it is. It's probably the best thing about WordPress is it can do anything you want it to do. And it's also maybe the worst thing about WordPress is it can do anything. And so sometimes that can lead to a little bit of complexity. And so stuff like this webinar and other help material is sometimes beneficial to kind of focus your view on, some things that might be useful, because it can be a lot to learn all at once. But here we're going to cover a lot of the basics that will make it easy to get started. Another thing that's really good about WordPress is you have full control over everything. So you can change the way things look. You can change your layout. That's true of most things that let you build websites, but you're also in control of your data, which is not true of a lot of website builders. That you can take your data and you can move it to either maybe a different hosting provider or even a different platform or away from WordPress if you want. But you own it, you control it. It's not like, say, setting up a Facebook page where you don't actually own that data, and you're relying on another company to, give you access to it, and you're relying on them not to take it down, that sort of thing. Where when you self-publish with something like WordPress, you kind of own that entire thing. And so you're the one that decides what goes up and what goes down and what's a part of your website. So you own the whole thing, which is really great. What is the block editor? Well, WordPress has been around for a long, long time. And one of the ways that it's evolved to be a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit more advanced in recent years is the block editor, where you're able to control the way that your website looks, because everything is broken into blocks, is what they're called. And you can move blocks around. There's like a paragraph block, there's a picture block, there's different blocks, and you can kind of almost like Lego bricks put together a site where you say, okay, I'm going to put this over here, I'm going to put this over here, I'm going to put this one on top of this one, and things like that. And so you can put together combinations of different blocks to put together what you want it to look like. And it's really nice because the old-fashioned way of doing this was you had to understand a lot of either PHP code or WordPress-specific shortcodes or things like that you would have to, you would find yourself doing this thing where you would go back and forth between, you would maybe create the content over here, and then you would look on another like window or another screen to see what it actually looked like. And you would, go into edit mode and you would change something, and then you'd kind of view it and see what it looks like. And there was all this kind of back and forth just to see, which is not great. One of the things that's really, really great about the block editor is it gives you kind of what you see is what you get. There's certain exceptions to that, but for the most part, when you're working on your site, you're working on it, you're seeing what it will actually look like while you work on it, which is really nice. It saves a lot of steps, and you don't have to have an extremely vivid imagination looking at some code and imagining, oh, this is going to look like this when I'm done. You can just look at it and use it, because makes the process a lot more visual. So it's really nice. And we'll get into some demonstrations later so you can see what I mean. All right, key benefits of the block editor. There are a lot of like different ways to do it. You don't have to use the block editor, and some people are still using the kind of more old-fashioned, what's called the classic editor. And there's other page builders out there too that you can look into if you want. But the thing that's nice about the block editor is there's a lot of compatibility. So a lot of the things that are built into WordPress and plugins and things are going to be compatible with it, because it's kind of the default way of doing things now in WordPress. And there's a lot of tools within it that make making content really nice. We'll get into some of those, but things like being able to duplicate content, or things like when you get something just the way you like it, you can actually save it like as a sync pattern, and then okay, I can use this in multiple places now that I have it just the way I want it, and things like that. Another thing that's annoying about the more old-fashioned traditional way of doing web development is sometimes, depending on how it was set up, you would make a change and you would have to make that change in a dozen or so places. Where, like, a more extreme example of this would be like, oh, I changed the color of a button. Now I need to go find all of the different buttons that are like this and change them all. One of the things that's really nice about the block editor is, depending on how you change that, you can have things, okay, I'm going to change them all at once. And it's really nice to just be able to preview that, see how it looks. And if you like it, save it, and it just kind of does it everywhere, and it's really nice. Or you can do it just in one place if you prefer. But like, it's nice that you don't have to change things. Oh, I've got 15 pages. Now I got to make 15 edits. It's nice that you can kind of do things all at once. So let's dive into the actual WordPress dashboard. So this is the WordPress dashboard, sometimes called WP Admin, is where you actually create and edit and manage the content. And so I am going to jump into a test website that I have here. And this is what it looks like. So here's my website here. It's just a demo website. I don't really have any content. But when I log into it, here is kind of the back end of the site. And so this is where I can go in and do things like add posts, add media, add pages, change things around, change settings. All of that happens back here. Since I'm a Bluehost customer, my site by default comes with the Bluehost plugin, which can do things like add a lot of cool store functionality. It can help make my website really fast with things like caching. We'll get into that later. But this is what people refer to as WP Admin for WordPress admin. And this is where you can do things like, add posts, add pages, that sort of thing. So, yeah, posts and pages. One of the most common questions I get, and I didn't see it in the Q&A yet, but one of the more common questions when we're doing these kind of beginner ones is, what's the difference between a post and a page? Well, if you think about it with a blog, usually people are looking at blog posts in reverse chronological order in like a list of like, oh, here's a list of updates, and it's blog posts. And pages are sometimes a little bit more evergreen in that, like, they can stay around and they're not often listed in those sorts of lists. So the real difference is really just how you use it and what URLs it's going to use. So you can use a post or you can use a page, but if you just sort of want to keep it organized in your mind of like, oh, well, some pages that I want around for a long time are an About Us page, a contact page, maybe if it's a store, I'm going to have like a checkout page and a cart page, those sorts of things. And those are going to be pages that stick around forever versus a blog post where I'm not going to delete it, but it's not going to show up on, as being very relevant maybe a couple of years from now. If a blog post to be more like, oh, I took a trip and here's some pictures from the trip or something like that, something a little bit more time-based, right? That's one way to use it. There's a lot of ways people have put things together, but posts are basically for the blog and pages are for the site, if that makes sense. So media is anything like pictures, videos, sometimes sound or things if you want, but usually pictures and videos. Plugins, let's get into plugins. That's kind of fun. Remember when we talked about how WordPress is really customizable and you can kind of do whatever you want? Well, let me show you one of the ways that you can do that. So when I go into here, into WP Admin, sometimes I want extra functionality that isn't part of WordPress. And so what I can do is I can go over here to plugins, and other people have written code for WordPress that I can add to my site. Some of these are big companies. Some of these are really small, simple plugins that people just find popular. Um, but like for example, sometimes I will write myself little notes in WP Admin, and I'll do like a little to-do list. Don't forget to prepare for the webinar. And I can do things like this. This is not part of WordPress core. So this isn't built into WordPress, but it's here because of a plugin that I added. And that plugin is WordPress dashboard notes. So I went in and I said, oh, let me add a new plugin. And of the plugins that I like, one of them is this one, dashboard notes. And it's really easy. You can just click install, and once it's installed, you can activate it. And then that new functionality is now a part of your site. So now I can add little to-do lists and things like that. That's just an example of a simple plugin that I really like. Some plugins are more powerful. Like if I'm going to add a store to my website, then it's a good idea to add WooCommerce, which I can search for by going to plugins, add new plugin, WooCommerce. Now, that's a whole set of webinars all to itself of how to use and set up WooCommerce. So I'm not going to do that as part of this demo here, but it's just an example that if I want more functionality, that's one of the ways you can do it, is that you can go in, find a plugin that does it. And sometimes you might find yourself researching plugins to say, well, what's the best plugin for this? What's the best plugin for that? Because oftentimes you'll find there's more than one way to do something. And so if you're a Bluehost customer, there's certain plugins that are actually a part of your plan, depending on which plan you have. Some of those are pretty neat for stores, membership sites, things like that. And you should also check out the functionality of the Bluehost plugin that comes pre-installed. There's quite a few things it does too. But getting back to the main topic of what is WP Admin and what are all the things it can do for you, we talked a little bit about posts. These are things that go into your blog. Pages, these are things like a contact page or an about us page, things like that. A home page maybe. We talked a little bit about plugins, which is how you add additional functionality to a website. Settings is exactly what it sounds like, where you can go in and change how something works. A lot of times when you install a plugin, it will add to this list of settings here. And so like one of my favorite plugins, for example, is called Yoast Duplicate Post. It's really cool because it lets you do things like, if I've got an old blog post that isn't getting much traffic anymore, but I think it's a good one, and I want to kind of rewrite and republish it, that's one of the things that this plugin will let me do, is it gives you a really easy way to go in and just rewrite and republish. And just as a quick example, it's got options that it adds to settings. So because that plugin is here, I've got extra settings now specific to that plugin, where I can change things about it. Not all plugins will add extra settings, but some will. So it's just something to keep in mind. Going back to our slides here. So yeah, posts, pages, media, that's things like pictures, plugins, settings. And there's, I can see there's been a few questions that have added. Yeah. Where to find the block editor. So yeah, let me show you that. When you're in your WordPress admin, I'm going to go over here to new at the top, and we're going to make a new page. And this screen right here is the block editor. And so I can add, sometimes, you can just start from scratch, and it's if you already have an idea of what you want to build. So you can add things like a paragraph block here. This is a short paragraph. So you can add that. You can add, an image. You can, there's a picture. I can move things around and say, oh, I want the picture to be first, or I want the paragraph to be first. But oftentimes I find it a little intimidating to go in and look at just this totally blank page. And so one of the things that's kind of cool that Bluehost customers have is Wonder Blocks, which is a set of styles that you can go in and use. And I can go in and look at some of these templates for different things. So if I'm making a home page or an About Us page or something like that, I can just go in here and say, oh, this one looks nice. And there it is. I've just added it. And I don't have to use my imagination because I can edit this pretty much in line here. And I can 15 years of experience. Let me change that to 10. And I can swap out pictures and things like that. If I click on this picture, I can hit replace and upload a new one. But yeah, you get the idea. And there's a lot of different templates and patterns in here that make it really nice. For people that don't have Wonder Blocks, there's also up here at the top, see where this plus is? Here, let me just start over. You've also got a bunch of different options here. These are all of the blocks that you have. And a lot of them do, some interesting things here. So we've got, and plugins can add additional blocks. So there's the ones that are built into WordPress, and then there's ones that other plugins add as well. So you can add all kinds of different things: comments, a login, logout button, author biography, embed a YouTube video, different things. Like there's so many different things you can add. Patterns kind of gives you something similar to what we were showing you before. These are created by the WordPress community and made available for free to anyone. You don't have to be a Bluehost customer to use these. The ones called Wonder Blocks, that is a Bluehost product. So these are ones that we added. And so Wonder Blocks headers, pricing table, you can really add whatever you want. And then, okay, here's a nice little pricing table. And then price. And there we go. There's my price page, or whatever it is, right? But the thing that's nice about this is you don't have to design something totally from scratch. You don't have to know how to put all of this together of like, okay, I'm going to make a table and I'm going to put this and I'm going to highlight this one and I'm going to add a button. Like you can just put it all together and then kind of at a high level change things. So that's one way to go about it. That's really easy. So that's where you can get to the block editor. Is the block editor was just that whole area we were working within. Site customization options. So these are the options that most people would have to do when they first start. At Bluehost, we actually set this up as part of the onboarding. So the first time that you log into WordPress, there's this onboarding process that we take you through that fills out things like your site title and picks out a theme, and we actually generate a theme for you based on a description of the site. It's really neat. But yeah, it's a thing you can also do manually after the fact. And I can share my screen for that. Let me do yeah. So if we go back to WordPress here, over in appearance, I can browse for themes here. But yeah, usually I'll just get a good popular theme, and then I spend most of my time in the block editor. Yith Wonder is one of my favorites. 2025 is really good. That's a new one that was recently released. But yeah, going back to our notes here. Getting started with the block editor. Yeah, let's walk through the various sections of this. So that content area is where we were typing, our words in, making our paragraph, adding pictures, all of that. Let's walk through the different areas of this. So I'm going to go and make a new page again. So up here at the top, this is here, and I'll just to make things easy, I'm going to put some content on this page. There we go. So yeah. So up here at the top, there's something called document overview, and if I select outline, then it will show me all of the sections of this that I can skip through. Or I can go into list view and kind of navigate like that. Like, so if I want to swap out, if I the smallest, middle, top tier, and then I say, oh, I want to actually swap these out. How do I do that? You can take these and you can actually click and drag between them, and I can say, okay, I want this one here, so that this is the middle tier and this is the top tier now, or whatever it is. And so as you click on this, you've got your outline or your list view can show you things, and sometimes that's useful because some of the more complex layouts, it's not immediately obvious how it was put together. It might be several stacks and rows and different blocks put together to make something. Like this is a list and a paragraph and a stack and a pricing item and a column. Like it's all of these things put together. And so if you're trying to figure out how to edit this or how to change the color of something, sometimes it's useful to be able to see, oh, this is how it's put together. It's almost like a blueprint of what it is that you're looking at. And you can say, oh, that's why there's space here, because there's a spacer. Well, I can make that bigger or smaller, or I can even get rid of it. I can say delete it, or I can duplicate it, or you can move it around and you can say, oh yeah, let me just put that at the top or the bottom or whatever. So yeah, that's what we've got. For individual blocks, if you want to change the settings, up here, you've got settings in your sidebar for the entire document, where like, what's the name of it, who's the author, what's the URL, or you've got options just for the individual block, where you're like, okay, let me change the colors, or let me change the border, different things like that, for an individual block or things like that. You can also you can select multiple and change multiple at the same time. And that's kind of fun. If you're a Bluehost customer and you have Wonder blocks, you can add in animations, which is kind of fun. And then as the page shows up. It's now animated, which is pretty neat. Go back to edit. So all of this is available on the right-hand side here. When you click this right here, kind of opens it up. Also, you can view this in different views where you can say, oh, show me what it looks like on a cell phone. Show me what it looks like on a tablet. Show me, desktop, that sort of thing. So you can do different things to kind of see all of that. Let's go back to our notes. All right. Yeah, so we talked about settings. We talked about navigating through blocks, toolbars, that sort of thing. Let's keep going. We got a lot to cover. I'm not going to jump into all of these individually. I'm just going to skip through. But if you're trying to figure out like what content is best, remember when we were looking at all the different blocks you can use? These are some of the ones you can use: text, headings, images, buttons, columns, and layouts. I'm not personally a designer, and so I like using a pre-made layout and then changing it a little bit to be what I want, rather than starting with a blank canvas and putting everything together. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of different types of blocks that you can use. Rearrange, duplicate, reuse, convert to group. Yeah, we can show you some of that. So going back to our screen, let's resume. If I edit this page again, so I'll go over here to my list view, and here are my 3 columns. If I delete this column, now I only have 2. Let's imagine we started out here and I wanted 3. Well, if I wanted to figure out, okay, well, what is this whole thing? I could click on it and then kind of navigate through this until I was able to figure out, okay, so this is is a column. Let me just duplicate it, and there we go. Now we've got 3 of them. Smallest, middle, top tier. There we go. And let's get some pricing that reflects that. There we go. And if we do something like this, then I can delete some of these things. So there we go. Here's my new pricing table. So in order to get that, all we did was, well, let's figure out what it is that we're duplicating, and then we can duplicate. You can also duplicate from here, where when you're using something, there's this little thing that follows you around, and you can click duplicate. Some people don't like it to follow you around. I'll get rid of our list view. Some people don't like it when it follows you around. They prefer that it just hangs out at the top. One of the things you can do is over here in your settings, you can actually put this little thing up here. And some people prefer that, to where they'll click on it and then they've got their settings. It works a little bit more like a document editor, where if you want to make something bold, you go up to the top and find the bold button. Some people prefer it to follow you around, where you can you can change things on the fly, and here you go. So it's just personal preference. But yeah, that's how you do that. You can copy things, you can duplicate them, you can Control C, Control V, that sort of thing. There's actually quite a few keyboard shortcuts as well. If you want to learn what they are, you just go up to this little menu here at the top and you click on keyboard shortcuts, and it'll show you all of the different things you can do. You actually, basically everything you can do with this editor, you can do with just a keyboard. You actually don't need your mouse at all. because there's so many keyboard shortcuts and just ways to navigate via the keyboard. It's pretty neat. Anyways, back to our notes that we have. You can duplicate things. Keyboard shortcuts we talked about. Formatting and customizing a block. I think we covered this a little bit, but we can show it off again. You can change things like size, color, alignment in settings. That's the thing that shows up on the right-hand side. Use headings to structure content properly. So what that means is just the biggest one is header 1, then header 2, and header 3. If all you're trying to do is change the size of something, then just change the size. But if the reason that there's header 1, header 2, there's these kind of levels, is it gives the page some structure of like, you can understand that something goes underneath something else. So where there's like a main topic and like, so like even in this document here, our notes that we've been going through this slideshow, we've got a header 1 that says make our text stand out, and these header 2 items of adjust font size, like, so it's like organized into sections. Web pages do that too because it makes it easier for people to read if they're using a screen reader. It also makes it easier for Google and other search engines to read if you use the proper headers. And so if all you're trying to change is font size, then just change the font size. That's fine. But headings give it something an idea of structure of like, there's the primary and the secondary and tertiary like levels of your content. Avoid too many fonts. Stick to 1 or 2 for consistency. Yeah, you don't want to go too crazy with the different fonts and stuff. And starting out with a good layout can kind of help you there. Of like, it'll look nice if you can keep things kind of consistent. So yeah, we've gone through that. Working with images and media. Okay, so this is another place where it's kind of fun to be a Bluehost customer, because one of the things that you have to try and think about is images make your site look nice, but they can also slow down a website. And so you want your images to be exactly the right size. If they're too big, like the file size is too big, then that's a lot of downloading that your site visitors have to do just to see your website. And sometimes if you go to a website and it takes a long time to load, a lot of times it's images or media, things like that, just taking a while to download. And so one of the things that's kind of neat that is built into Bluehost is, if you're a Bluehost customer using the Bluehost plugin, let me show you something cool that you can do. So let's go in here. So I'm going to go into the Bluehost plugin. I'm going to go to performance. One of the things that we have here is image optimization. And what image optimization does is it will actually run your images through an image optimizer to make sure that they're the smallest size possible while still looking good. And it'll convert them to other formats like WebP, because when you take a picture like on your phone or with a camera, it's doing it in a format that makes sense for the camera. But there's other formats like WebP that are designed for browsers that are much, much smaller and load really, really quickly. But that normally, by default, your phone is not going to do WebP. And so this can automatically convert that. It's one of the cool things that the Bluehost plugin does. If you turn it on, it can start to automatically convert your images as you upload them to those kind of next generation formats like WebP. So you don't even have to worry about it. So as you're uploading images, it will convert them to other formats for you. It will crunch down these images so that they take up less space, and it's a lot faster to load the pages. And there's some other more technical things that the plugin is able to do to make your site faster. So, by the way, if anybody has a site that already exists and you're a Bluehost customer, if you're having problems with your site speed, check out what the Bluehost plugin can do, because there's a lot of cool little goodies in here that can make your website pretty fast that not everybody knows about. So that's a pro tip for you. Going back to our notes, use cover blocks for full width banners. We kind of, yeah, so there's ways to use images that kind of bake the image into the design. And if you're using a good template, it'll account for that. If you're using a picture as part of your content, like you've got like a paragraph and a picture of something and then a paragraph, it's good to put in what's called alt text. I can show you that. And what that just makes it so that people who can't see really well, who are using screen readers that will describe what's on the page for them, it will read that to them. And it also helps with search engine optimization. So like Google can see what it is and things like that. So if I'm in here and I make a new post, if I've got, let's add a paragraph here. We'll add an image, which I'm going to use from my image library. Now you might be thinking, whoa, that was really fast. Can you do that slower? Yeah, sure. So image, and then it'll say, do you want to upload it from your computer? Do you want to use the library that's already there? So I've already got a few images uploaded here, so I'm going to use this one. That's a picture of the moon. And I'm going to insert that. So over here on the right, we've got alternative text. So this is where I can describe the picture. And this is good for our search engines, and it's good for people that can't see. And so I'm just going to say the moon's surface. It can be really short description. It doesn't have to be long paragraph, but it's just that way you're not missing out on anything. If one of your users, has a visual impairment or something like that, and they have to have a screen reader read to them what's on the page, that's enormously valuable. And it helps with SEO, which will help your site get found by search engines. So that's all that is. That's alt text. And so when you click on an image, it'll just be right here to the right. Going back to our notes. Creating a clean layout. This is where you want to keep in mind that when you're picking out a layout, to just use something that looks good, that isn't going to cram too much information into too small a space. So it's okay to have what we call negative space, to have blank areas there. And it's okay if not everything fits above the fold, as we say. Advanced block features. We're just going to skim through this because a lot of this we've already talked about. So reusable blocks is a concept where you can save and reuse things. So if you put together a block and customize it, you can actually save that block and reuse it in other places, so that when you change something about it in one place, it'll change in all of the others. Block patterns, that's what we've been using so far. Like Wonder Blocks is a pattern library that uses things like columns and groups to put things together. Embedding media easily. We did that already as well, where you can add images. You can add, the same way that I added an image, you can add a YouTube video or things like that. 9 times out of 10, you can actually just paste a link into your WordPress editor of like a YouTube video or whatever it is you're trying to embed. You can just copy paste it right in there, and it will embed. So things like Twitter or Instagram or Facebook posts, things like that, you can just, it's not called Twitter anymore, but you can just paste it right in there and it'll embed really nicely. So like if you've ever been on a website and you can see like somebody's talking about something someone said on Facebook, and like here's like a little post of it. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. Plugins, we've talked about already how you can add functionality, which is really nice. So things like Yoast SEO are really good for search engine optimization. There's contact form plugins, optimization plugins, things like that, things that make your website faster. One of the things that is nice for Bluehost customers is the Bluehost plugin actually works as a caching plugin, so you don't need to go out and find one. We have one that works with our hardware layer of caching servers. Yoast SEO and Yoast and Bluehost are part of the same company, and so that's, I've got a lot of experience using Yoast, and it's a really good plugin. There's a lot of different plugins available for forms. I like the Jetpack forms just because it's really easy to set up. Contact Form 7 is really popular. One thing to keep in mind, and we're coming close to the end of this here. One thing to keep in mind is you want to be careful about the quality of the plugins that you add. Not all plugins are created equal, and as a general kind of the traditional wisdom is that too many plugins can slow your site down. That being said, there are sites that run really, really fast that have a ton of plugins, and there are sites that run slowly that don't have very many. So it's not a direct indicator, but it is something that you generally have to think about, is that the more plugins you add, the more code is running on your site. So if you're not using something, if you installed it, tried it out, and you're like, nah, this isn't for me, go ahead and deactivate and delete that plugin. And right in that same plugin section where you add plugins, that's where you delete them too. So really only keep a plugin around if it's really useful for your site. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, hey, if a plugin is slowing down my site, but I really need that functionality, what do I do? That's one of the more common questions I get. There's two answers to that, both of which I think are true. One is see if there's another plugin that does the same thing that doesn't slow your site down. And that's usually the first thing I'll try. The second thing is, if it's really important for your website, maybe you don't compromise. Maybe you just keep that plugin around and get more powerful hosting. Talk to your hosting provider and say, hey, what can you do for me? And maybe they have recommendations on how to make your website faster. Maybe it requires getting a more powerful hosting plan, or sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just, change this setting over here and your site is a lot faster. Like we were talking about with the Bluehost plugins, got some cool stuff in there that can make your site fast. So a lot of hosting providers are going to be able to help you make your website faster. Bluehost is one of them. Best practices, next steps. Make sure that you're using the latest version of everything. This is very important. A lot of times there's security updates, things that protect your site from getting hacked. And sometimes there's new functionality and things too. So make sure you're always using the latest version of everything. If you're a Bluehost customer, then by default, plugins and themes and WordPress core will update by themselves. They update automatically. We manage that for you. If you turn off auto update, then just make sure you log into WP admin, and I'll show you just real quick. Over here in your dashboard, there's a section called updates. If you go here, since I'm using auto update, the site's automatically kept up to date. But if I were to turn that off, then there would be a list here of, here's plugins, themes, WordPress core, things that need to be updated. It's important to stay on the latest version. That's what's going to keep your site. The number one thing to keep your site safe is to be on the latest version of WordPress, be on the latest version of all of the plugins that you use. Write better content with a block editor. Images and videos make things engaging. Yep, that's true. Headings, bullet points make things easy. Depending on what kind of content you're writing, that's more or less important. Think about your audience, and if your audience is one that's likely to just be scanning, or if they're going to dig in and read it, that just depends on who it is you're trying to reach with your website. Keep paragraphs as small as possible, but no shorter. Or in other words, sometimes you do have to have a big paragraph, and that's okay. But just as small as possible. Where to learn more. So, Bluehost has a great webinar series, but also WordPress.org has a lot of help. YouTube does. With YouTube, you do have to watch out and make sure it's sort of recent. Bluehost blogs and tutorials are really good. Oftentimes, your hosting provider will be able to help you a little bit with WordPress. Bluehost certainly will. If you get stuck, WordPress.org forums. I mean, I've been using WordPress for over 10 years now, and I still go to the WordPress.org forums for help. There's oftentimes tutorials online. If you're running into a kind of a weird problem of something's broken, you can try turning off plugins to see if the functionality is fixed. Or if it's a problem specific to a plugin, lots of times you can find help on WordPress.org for those plugins. And okay, now we're in the Q&A. So we made it through. I think we're a little bit over on time, so we might have to squish a bit. But what questions do we have that are still unanswered, Mr. Sears?
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you walking us through that. I know it's not always easy to bounce back and forth from a deck to a live demo, but I appreciate you doing that. I think you handled that really, really well. We have a handful of questions. I don't think we'll be able to get through all of them, so let me try to skim and kind of streamline them a little bit. So one person asked, what are the most important settings I should configure after installing WordPress? Maybe we'll start with that one.
Well, it depends on the type of website. If it's an e-commerce site, like you're selling things, that's a whole section of things, and you're going to want to look into how to set up an online store. If it's more of a personal blog, or if it's just a business website, then yeah, the settings you're going to want to look at is make sure there's something called permalinks. I'll share my screen really quick. If you're a Bluehost customer, we turn this on by default. But over here in settings, permalinks, you can change the structure of how your posts show up. Like it could just be the name of the post. It can maybe include the year. But the nice thing about doing something like this is it just makes it a little easier for search engines to understand what it is. I wouldn't recommend this because a lot of plugins actually won't work with that. So make sure you're using something like post name or something that puts the post name and the date in there. That's one that you'll really want to check for.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Are there any other settings? Okay.
That's the one that I sort of tell everyone to watch out for, because most of the time you'll notice if something's wrong. That's the one that sort of sneaks up on people that they don't really realize they can change.
Understood. Next question. Someone said they started building their site a while ago using the classic editor. Can they switch over now and build on their existing site with the block editor?
Yes, absolutely they can. So if you're using the classic editor plugin, you'll actually have an option every time you make a new post or a page to switch to using the block editor. And I would recommend it just because It's getting better all the time, and it's going to be a lot more future proof than using the classic editor. If you're still using the classic editor, I would recommend switching if you can. It's worth making the switch, even if you have to find a new theme.
Okay, perfect. One of the other questions here we have is, as you're building a new site, can you kind of go through the prioritization between like theme, plugins, content, media? In your mind, is there like a best practice of what order of operations when you're building a new site?
Well, start with a good theme, right? It's one of the things we do when we take new Bluehost sites that are created. We'll take them through our onboarding. Is we'll actually create a theme for them, but start with a good theme because that's going to be kind of your foundation, and then focus a lot on your content. Right, your ultimate goal here, usually with most websites, is going to be make a website that people want to go to, and that's the best SEO advice you're ever going to get too, regardless of all the technical pieces of it, which are important. The most important thing to rank highly on Google is to make a website that a lot of people want to go to write content or make videos or whatever it is that you're creating your content. Make something that people want to see.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, honestly. Okay, the next question. Let's see. Kind of going along the same lines of that, how do I update plugins safely without breaking my site?
So one of the things that can sometimes happen is sometimes things can change in unexpected ways when you update a plugin, where before it worked like this and now it works like this, and then suddenly something doesn't look right or something works differently, and that can be a problem. One of the things you can do to avoid this being as much of a problem is called staging. So one of the tools that you have available as a Bluehost customer is you can actually create a staging site. It's like a copy of your website, and then make whatever changes you want in a staging environment before you actually do them on the production site. It takes a minute to spin it up, but once it does, you can go into a staging copy of the site, make whatever changes you're going to make, and that can include things like updating plugins if you want to be somewhat manual about it. And then you can see how it works, test it out. If it's something really, really important that you want to be very careful about, then yeah, you can do it in a staging site, and if it works well, then you can feel safe to do it again on your regular website. If you're not a Bluehost customer and so you're not using this staging here, there's also staging plugins you can use. So I'm just going to search for staging, and there's a number of options here that work pretty well. You can just pick one, but that's my advice for that.
Awesome. I think that's great advice. As we go through our final couple questions, I am going to advance this slide. This just has a couple other resources. I know, Chris, you covered a handful of resources already, but this just has a few additional ways that you can get help if you're still feeling a little bit stuck. And the point of these webinars is to make sure that you as the attendees are feeling educated and you have something to engage with to help you in this website building process, because that's really what Bluehost is trying to focus on. It's making sure that you know that you have a partner in the website building process with Bluehost. So a few more questions and then we'll probably end. Next question I see here is actually we'll go with this, a similar plugin one. Can plugins slow down my website, and how do I know which plugin is slowing it down?
Okay. Plugins can slow down your website just because there's more code that's running. However, it depends on the plugin. It's more about the quality than it is the quantity. Some plugins, for example, will actually speed up your website. There's all that cool stuff baked into the Bluehost plugin, for example, that makes your website run faster. Like you can crunch images and turn on lazy loading, and the performance features, caching. So some plugins will actually make your website load faster. But yeah, some plugins can slow you down. One of the easiest ways to do it is just turn off turn off plugins that you suspect might be causing a problem, and see if the speed problem goes away. Staging sites are great for this because you can be kind of extreme with it, and you can. I'm just going to turn off a bunch of plugins and see what helps. A lot of times, browsers, and I'll cover this as quickly as I can. Browsers have built into them tools that you can use, where you can, if I right click and do inspect, if I go over here to Lighthouse, I can actually run a test on the performance of a site. And if
I'm
I
not sure
just
if that's showing for us because of the way you're sharing your screen. Right now, I'm just seeing a blank white screen.
oh, lame, it's not showing the whole thing. Anyways, if you just Google Lighthouse test, it'll show you how to do it. And then that will actually give you a score. So something that's like quantifiable of like, here's my performance score, and it'll give you some advice on things to change. Turn off some plugins and see if that score gets better or worse.
Okay.
Is one thing you can try.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've used this analogy many times before, probably with a webinar with you as well, Chris. But I feel like plugins are kind of like if you're going on a backpacking/camping trip.
Yes.
What do you
Yes.
need to put in your bag? Water, probably pretty good idea. Cast iron cooking set, maybe not as critical. So it has its functionality for sure. But if you are the one carrying your bag full of those things, then you might need to make some calls as to how necessary that actually is. Obviously, it has functionality, but
Right.
okay. Looking at the questions, I think we covered most of them in here. We'll end on this one. Can I edit my site's CSS without it disappearing when I update the theme?
Yes. Yes, you can. And I have to demo this one.
Okay.
The So when I go in here to edit site, which if I'm in WP admin, I would go appearance editor. Or if I'm on the front end of the site, I do edit site. That's how you get there. So here is where you can get into the actual. So yeah, welcome to styles. Next, next, next. So when you click on styles right here, then you'll click additional CSS, or you can get here additional CSS. It's in both places. This is where you can paste in CSS, and even when your theme updates, this will still be here. So if I, background red or something, it will, but I can do like body background red. Boom, or something like that. Whatever your CSS is that you're trying to change, it can you can save it there, and it'll still be there when you update. There's also plugins that you can use, but this is the canonical WordPress way to do it, which is nice. If you go and change the theme files themselves, like on the server, that's when you're going to run into problems, because the next time your theme updates, those are just going to get erased because it'll just come in with the next copy. All those changes you made are going to go away. So you're going to be much better off making CSS changes here, where they're going to be saved even when you update versions of WordPress, versions of your theme, etc.
It's like a protected environment essentially that you can put your CSS into.
Right. Yeah, because this will just be applied.
Right.
After whatever it is that you're looking to change, you can still you can still have that be applied. So yeah, it's just styles, additional CSS, and there you go. Some themes will actually come with um, with multiple styles, like, and so that's another thing to keep in mind is, you can add CSS on top of that, but yeah, that's where I would make that change.
Perfect. I think that's the question we're going to end on today. So, Chris, huge thank you for stopping by and for teaching us how to use the block editor better. Use the block editor better
No, I like
than
that.
before. And thank you all for those that tuned in and contributed to the conversation today. We deeply appreciate it. We're always looking for ways that we can improve this. So if you have any suggestions, drop them in the chat or in the follow-up survey. So thank you again, Chris, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.